On my 75th birthday, my son slid a power of attorney across the cake and said, "Sign your house over. It's safer this way." The candles were still burning, 12 small flames reflected in the silver of his pen. I smelled lemon, vanilla, a hint of smoke, and something else I couldn't name yet, something metallic and cold. "Today?" I asked, pushing my glasses up. My daughter-in-law smiled too wide and lifted the knife like a hostess in a commercial. "It's routine, Mom," my son said, tapping the signature line. "Just in case. You forget things." "I forget where I put my reading glasses," I said. "Not my name." A man in a navy suit cleared his throat from the archway. "I'm Daniel," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Financial services. We've prepared everything so you don't have to worry." Prepared, as if I were a casserole warming under foil. My granddaughter's card sat beside the cake, crayon flowers and shaky letters. "Happy birthday, Nana." Even her spelling felt kinder. I lifted the first page. The date was filled in, today's date, as if the decision had already been made. On page 2, my address sat there in neat print, the house my late husband painted himself to save money one July when the air was too hot to breathe. "Selling would be smart," my daughter-in-law added carefully, "the way you talk to a skittish dog. Stairs aren't good for your hips." "And where would I go?" I asked. "Downstairs," my son said. "Just for now, until everything's settled." He couldn't hold my gaze. His eyes drifted to the framed photo of him on his father's shoulders, reaching for apples. I remembered the weight of that boy after a long day, the sweet dampness of his hair when he fell asleep in the car. "Please don't make this hard," he said, softly. How does a son learn to speak to his mother like she's a problem to solve? When did the woman who taught him to tie his shoes become a liability on a spreadsheet? My hands didn't shake. I set the paper down and folded the edge of the napkin, making a small, sharp triangle. "I appreciate your concern," I said, and felt the room exhale. No one noticed the small recorder zipped into my sweater pocket from last night's phone call, or the folder already at my lawyer's office with a stamped receipt, or the way I'd moved certain keys from one ring to another weeks ago, just to hear how they sounded. Little do they know, I've been taking notes for months, dates, names, the exact words people use when they believe you're not listening. I blew out the candles. "All right," I said, sliding the papers back with a smile only I understood. But to understand how it all happened, I have to go back to the beginning. The first sign was small enough to pass as love. My daughter-in-law reorganized my pillbox. "You take the blue one at night," she said, after moving it to the morning slot. "You've been mixing them up." I hadn't. I let her finish and then put the blue back where it belonged when she went to fetch my coat. The second sign was louder. At the pharmacy, my card declined with a cheery chirp. "Looks like your monthly limit kicked in," the clerk said. Monthly limit. I had never set one. At home, I found a new app on my phone, an orange one with a $sign. "Budgeting," the icon said, with a little leaf that made thrift look wholesome. My son had installed it to help. He had connected it to my checking and set safe spending alerts, complete with soft bells that sounded whenever I bought paper towels or blueberries, not on sale. The third sign had teeth. The school called to tell me I was no longer an authorized pickup for my granddaughter. "We just need an updated list," the secretary said, apologetic. "Your daughter-in-law told us you moved out of the district." I hadn't moved an inch. That afternoon I went to see Ms. Alvarez. Her office sat above a laundromat that hummed like a low field of bees. She was a compact woman my age, with a braid as thick as a rope, and a habit of listening so hard you could hear your own voice change. "Tell me everything," she said. And I did. I told her about the blue pill moved to morning, the budget app, the school pickup list, the envelopes suddenly addressed to current resident, as if I had evaporated. When I finished, she leaned back and pinched the bridge of her nose. "You're not the first," she said, "and you won't be the last. We do this the clean way. No fights in kitchens. Paper is our friend. Do you have a will?" "I do," I said. "From when my husband was alive. He left me the house. We left our son the lake cabin for when he was ready to be responsible. The cabin had been in my family since my father could swim the length of it without resting." "We'll update everything," she said. "Power of attorney, yours, not theirs. Health directives. A trust for the house. Quiet title if needed. We'll put a small bell on your accounts. The banks call me if anyone tries to change a password. And we'll get a cognitive evaluation from your doctor, just in case someone decides you're forgetful at a convenient moment." I felt 20 pounds lighter walking down her stairs. The laundromat heat rose up and wrapped my ankles. Someone laughed. A machine clicked off, all simple sounds of lives going on. I bought a small recorder on my way home because Ms. Alvarez said truth was a shy animal that came out when it thought it was alone. The calls started 2 weeks later. First my son, casual. "Hey Mom, did you ever figure out how to send me your bank login? I can just pay your utilities from my account. Keep things simple." I said I preferred to write checks. I said balancing my own ledger was how I kept my brain sharp. He chuckled like I was charming. Second, my daughter-in-law, sugary. We found a perfect 2-bedroom with an accessible bath. Ground floor near Danielle's. I sent you the photos. The photos were nice, a beige carpet, light streams arranged to look like a life. Then the man in the navy suit started texting me, reminders, Friday 13 p.m., review documents, Wednesday at 10 a.m., notary available. He wrote as if an invisible we had already decided. I never decided anything without tea and a walk around the block. The texts piled up in my phone, and the recorder caught the sound of my own breath after I set it down. Miss Alvarez moved like water around stone. She recorded my trust with a deed that spoke quietly. The house was no longer mine to give or theirs to take, though I could live in it as long as I lived. She called my bank and added a very specific note next to my name. Any durable power of attorney presented must be verified by Ms. Alvarez's office first, and no wire transfers without my voice on the line. A question only I would know. A question only my husband and I had shared. What did he whisper to you when the power came back after the ice storm? The answer is the reason my kitchen always smells like lemon. I didn't tell my son about any of it. I baked an apple pie and brought it over with a jar of cinnamon sticks tied with twine. I listened, Det pressed against the edges of their living room like a fog you could taste. My son's jaw clicked when he chewed. He glanced at his phone every few minutes. When I asked how work was going, he said, "Getting there," and changed the subject to my knees. My daughter-in-law kept saying the word stability. The more often she said it, the more unstable the room felt. The day of my birthday, I was ready. I wore the cardigan with deep pockets. I charged the recorder and tucked it inside. I placed my driver's license, my passport, and my marriage certificate in a manila envelope in my purse. I put the spare key where Ms. Alvarez had told me to put it, in my neighbor Harlan's mailbox, along with a note that if I texted him the word apples, he should call her before calling me. Harlan is 68 with a knee that stiffens in the damp and a habit of bringing my trash cans up to the garage before I wake. He was a union electrician before his hands began to tremble. He has a good nose for trouble and a better nose for cinnamon. When he saw me that morning, he said, "You baked," and then, quieter, "You sure?" I nodded. He nodded back. Men of Harlan's generation, like a plan that fits in a pocket. When my son slid the papers across my birthday cake, I felt my heart thump once in my throat and then settle. I asked my questions. I watched their faces. I let my daughter-in-law say cozy and safe and routine until the words lost shape. I watched the man in the navy suit catalogue my family photos with his glance. Leverage, leverage, leverage. When I said I appreciated their concern, my son relaxed his shoulders as if a load had shifted from him to me. That night I placed the recorder on the table and listened. The microphone had caught the soft scrape of the pen, the murmur of "just sign," the sharper edge of my daughter-in-law's voice when she said, "Sell." I made tea and wrote down the timestamps in a notebook I labeled recipes in case anyone looked. Beside them I wrote the date of the cognitive evaluation Ms. Alvarez had ordered. The doctor had laughed when I beat him at the 3 words backwards test. "You'll be fine long after I'm retired," he said. 2 days later, a real estate listing appeared online. My house, my kitchen, my maple tree. The photography was bright and unkind. The description said, "estate sale," and "motivated sellers," and "bring your offers." The price was flattering in a way that felt like an insult. I scrolled through the photos until I saw one of my bedroom, bed made, quilt folded at the foot, the book I was reading face down on the nightstand. He had taken the photos while I was at my appointment. I set the phone down gently, like setting down a newborn with a fever. I forwarded the listing to Ms. Alvarez. She called within the hour. "We'll file a notice," she said. "List pendants. Nobody touches a thing. I'll also place a call to the broker. You'll enjoy that part." I did. She put me on speaker. The broker, a woman with a voice like hard candy, said, "I was told the seller is relocating to be with family." Ms. Alvarez said, "The seller is not relocating and the property is held in trust. Remove the listing by end of day or expect an injunction and a formal complaint." The woman paused just long enough to imagine paperwork. "We'll remove the listing," she said. My son called 10 minutes later. "Why would you do that?" His voice was tight between anger and pleading. We were trying to help. Help me by not posting my bedroom on the internet, I said. Help me by not telling strangers I've died. No one said that. The words estate sale do a lot of work, I said. There was silence, then a soft, practiced sigh. Mom, you're making this hard. I'm making it honest, I said, and hung up. The next week they escalated. Someone tried to access my online banking from an unfamiliar device at 2 a.m. The bank called Ms. Alvarez, and Ms. Alvarez called me. We're fine, she said, but tighten the net. I changed nothing and changed everything. I moved my Tuesday lunch at the cafe to Thursday. I parked one slot over from my usual grocery spot. I began locking the interior door between the garage and the kitchen. The routine of small alterations steadied me. So did Harlan, who took to sitting on his porch with a paperback and a thermos as if he had retired there on purpose. On a rainy Tuesday, my daughter-in-law arrived unannounced with 3 cardboard boxes and a label maker. Just the essentials, she said, moving through my rooms with brisk, polite speed. We'll put the rest in storage. She labeled one box basement, bedding. Another basement, kitchen. The third, in thin letters, Mom's keepsakes. She placed my wedding album on top of it, then thought better, and slid it underneath 3 folded dish towels, as if shame were heavier than memory. Give me a minute, I said, and went to the bathroom to breathe. I texted apples to Harlan and then deleted the text. When I came back out, my daughter-in-law was in the study, with my filing cabinet open, lips pursed as if whistling at a dog. She had a stack of envelopes in her hand. These look important, she said, too light. They are, I said, and took them back. Most were blank. The ones that weren't were already scanned and sent to Ms. Alvarez months ago. She squeezed my forearm, not quite a threat and not quite affection, and said, "You're going to love the downstairs." I moved to the basement that weekend. It was my choice to go. Ms. Alvarez and I had talked it through. "You need them to write the story for us," she said. "Let them demonstrate. 3 weeks. Record what they do with you in reach." I carried my own suitcase down the stairs. I took the quilt, and the family Bible and the kettle. I left the framed photos on the mantels upstairs where they belonged. The basement smelled like damp and lemon cleaner. Someone had put a rug down with a pattern that tried and failed to look cheerful. The first night I lay on the fold-out couch and listened to the house I knew from above. It was louder from underneath. Footsteps became directives. Water through pipes became instructions. The television a border you couldn't cross. In the morning I made coffee and met my son's eyes across the kitchen island. "It's not forever," he said. "It never is," I said. Downstairs I wrote. Each day had a line. Monday, doctor changed my prescription without explaining why. Tuesday, bank called about attempted password change. I confirmed it was not me. Wednesday, Daniel arrived with new papers and told me my signature would save everyone trouble. I meanwhile recorded the part where he said, "We can make the date last week. It'll look cleaner." Thursday. My granddaughter whispered that her mom had said Nana was moving to a smaller place because big houses are for families, then asked quietly if I wasn't family anymore. On Friday, Harlan knocked twice and handed me a bag of plums. "You okay down there?" he asked. "For now," I said. He nodded and set the bag on the washer. "I called a buddy," he said, as if mentioning the weather. "Retired deputy. Good man. If you need him, say you want to borrow a ladder." My son's voice changed over those weeks. It softened when he asked for what he wanted, then sharpened when he didn't get it. "Mom, it's not like we're trying to hurt you," he said, when I refused to sign a paper that gave Daniel permission to streamline my investments. "It's just, you had your time. Let us manage things for a while." "You had your childhood," I said. "I managed that." He laughed without humor. "This is different." "Yes," I said. "Now you're the one who's frightened." He didn't answer. Fear has its own silence. The middle of the story came on a Sunday. I woke to the sound of quiet above me, the kind of quiet that hides something heavy. I went upstairs and found my son at the kitchen table with a stack of mail and 2 empty coffee cups. He looked older than he had the month before, so tired it made my chest ache. "Sit," he said, and I did. He pushed an envelope toward me. "I messed up," he said. Inside was a notice from the state about a business loan in default, numbers lined up like soldiers on the page. "We used the house as collateral." His voice cracked on the word "we." "Daniel said it was normal." "The house you don't own," I said. He said it was just to get the line of credit approved. An internal note. He said we'd never need to use it. "And yet here we are," I said. He put his hand over his face and sat very still. When he spoke, his voice came from the palm of his hand. "I thought I could fix it before you noticed. By taking my house. By keeping your house afloat," he said, and the bewilderment in his eyes was almost worse than the plan. "You wouldn't be here without me." "I taught you to read," I said. "I taught you to drive. I taught you what my father taught me. You do not take a thing someone needs to stand up." He didn't look at me. He said very softly, "I don't know how to stop it anymore." I made us both tea. I put honey in his the way he liked when he was 10. "You could have told me," I said. "You would have said no," he said. And there it was, the child logic in a man's mouth. "Sometimes no is love," I said. "Sometimes no saves a life." He rubbed his head like his scalp hurt. "Mom, I didn't know Daniel was—" He stopped. "Was what?" He swallowed. "He's my friend." The way he said friend told the truth. A friend who charged for loyalty and interest on shame. When he left the table, I took his phone and photographed the messages he had with Daniel. The recorder in my pocket caught the sound of the camera shutter. I sent the photos to Ms. Alvarez, then called Harlan and asked if I could borrow a ladder. He arrived in 10 minutes with a tin of biscuits and the retired deputy, Ralph, with kind eyes and a steady jaw. Ralph listened. He didn't say sympathy words. He asked for dates and names. He asked for a copy of the listing. He asked for the exact minute on the tape where Daniel mentioned changing dates to make things cleaner. When we finished, he said, "You're doing just fine," then added, "It gets messy before it gets clean." Ms. Alvarez called back with what she called a small gift. "Daniel is not licensed," she said. "He was once, but not now. He's been barred from acting as an advisor. The state has a file. He's been doing this with friends. We'll make use of that." The plan was simple as a knot. We would let them think I had changed my mind. I would ask for a meeting to finalize the paperwork. We would invite a notary. We would invite Daniel. We would invite my son and my daughter-in-law. And we would invite, without their knowing, a court reporter Ms. Alvarez trusted, and a deputy with a quiet vest under his shirt. Paper would be our friend again. I baked a cake that morning, a duplicate of my birthday cake with lemon frosting and small silver sprinkles, because I needed my hands to do something kind. I set the table with plates I didn't mind breaking. When my son and his wife walked in with Daniel behind them, the air in the room changed shape, heavy in the corners. "Mom," my son said, relieved. "Thank you." He hugged me with both arms, and I let him. My daughter-in-law kissed my cheek. Daniel shook my hand with a firmness he believed meant confidence. "We'll make this easy," he said. Ms. Alvarez arrived with a portfolio and a calm so steady I wanted to lay my head on it. "Shall we?" she said, and opened the folder. The notary took a breath as if about to dive. The court reporter sat up on the edge of the buffet and began to type, a soft storm of clicks. Daniel slid a document across to me. "Sign here and here," he said, tapping lines with my name under them. My name was spelled correctly this time. I took my time. I turned each page slowly. When I reached the paragraph that gave my son authority to manage the trust, I set my finger on the word manage and looked up at Daniel. "This word," I said, "it does a lot of work." "It's standard," he said. "It's vague," Ms. Alvarez said. He smiled the way men smile when they plan to go around a woman and aim instead. He looked at my son. "We can remove that if it makes your mother more comfortable," he said. "We'll handle those details later." The recorder in my pocket caught the small sound Ms. Alvarez made when she chose a point to pounce. "We'll handle those details now," she said. "Also, Daniel, before we finalize anything, I need to see your license." He blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your license to provide financial advice," she said. "Your registration, your fidelity bond." She listed the words like beads on a rosary. "You're about to be a fiduciary. I need to see you're allowed to be one." He laughed, short. "I'm not the one signing. You're the one soliciting," she said. "License, please." My son shifted in his chair. "Mom, this is unnecessary." "What's necessary is what we decide," I said, and kept my voice kind. "We can wait." Daniel reached into his briefcase and came up empty-handed in a very specific way. He said, "I left it in the car," and stood. Ralph was in the hallway. He didn't block the door. He didn't need to. "Sir," he said, voice casual. "Stay." Daniel looked at him, at his eyes, and sat back down without asking why obedience felt so familiar. Ms. Alvarez set a printout on the table. It was Daniel's disciplinary record. The court reporter's keys clicked faster. "Is this you?" she asked, and in the quiet that followed I heard my own heart sounding a note I hadn't heard since my wedding day, the clear tone of a promise kept to myself. Daniel's mouth opened and closed. "That's old," he said. "It's resolved." "It's current," she said, and slid a second page into place. "And it's relevant. Gentlemen, here's what will happen. Nobody will sign anything today. Mrs. Carter's house is held in trust beyond your reach. Any attempt to encumber it is fraud. Any attempt to relocate her against her will is unlawful restraint. Any attempt to access her accounts triggers notices you would prefer not to receive. You will now leave her home. If you do not, you will be escorted. Mr. Carter, you will come back tomorrow at noon to pick up a list of resources you may find useful, including debt counseling and a consultation with a legitimate advisor. Daniel, you will not contact this family again." The room made a low sound like a storm rolling past the edge of a field. My son's face went through 3 colors and then landed on something I used to see when he fell off his bike and scraped his knees, a fragile stubbornness that wanted to be bravery so badly it ached. "Mom," he said, "you can't do this to me." "I am not doing anything to you," I said. "I am doing something for me." My daughter-in-law stood too fast and knocked her knee into the table. The cake shivered. "We were only trying to—" She stopped. The sentence had no honest ending. Daniel's eyes went thin. "You don't know what you're starting," he said. "I know exactly what I'm finishing," I said. They left. Ralph followed them to the curb and stood with his hands in his pockets until Daniel drove away in a car too shiny for a man with a broken license. My son looked back once, as if I might call him and change the story. I did not. That night the house felt like itself again. I made tea and took my cup to the porch. The maple moved the way it had the year we planted it, leaves talking to each other in small green voices. Harlan shuffled across the lawn with 2 folding chairs and a grin. "I didn't know that lawyer of yours could lasso a man with paper," he said. "She doesn't lasso," I said. "She sets fences," he laughed. "Same effect." The next days were administration, which is another word for healing. Ms. Alvarez filed petitions and notices I barely understood and did not need to. The broker removed the listing. The bank put a bright red note on my account that may as well have said, "Do not try it." My doctor faxed a letter. She even put in a line about my crossword. Times, because she knows who I am. The school secretary put me back on the pickup list and added a star next to my name. My son came at noon as promised. He looked smaller in the doorway than a man his age ought to look. Ms. Alvarez handed him a folder. "This is what you need," she said. "A debt counselor, a real advisor, a support group, a lawyer of your own, and this," she held up a paper with a small black square at the bottom, "is a copy of the complaint we filed naming Daniel. You are not named. Do not make us change that." He stared at the folder and then at me. I thought you'd be kinder, he said. I am being kind, I said. I am also being clear. He swallowed. What about the cabin? What about it? You said it would be mine someday. Someday is not today, I said. Someday is when you can stand on your own feet and not on your mother's back. He took the folder. He didn't slam the door. That was progress. Weeks passed and the shape of my life settled again. I moved back upstairs and put the quilt on my bed. I carried the boxes labelled basement to the garage and relabelled them with a black marker. Donate, keep, garbage. I added a box named granddaughter and began to fill it with things that weren't things. A map to the wild blackberry bushes at the park, the recipe for the lemon frosting for when she is tall enough to reach the mixer, a photograph of her grandfather's hands fixing a loose hinge on a cabinet door. Daniel did not leave. He called twice from numbers I didn't recognize and hung up when Ms. Alvarez answered. He sent an envelope with no return address that contained a single sheet of paper, a copy of a power of attorney with a signature that looked more like mine than mine did. Ms. Alvarez smiled the kind of smile a woman smiles when she is about to do exactly what someone thinks she will not. Thank you for the evidence, she said, and by the end of the week a detective had called her to ask for my tapes. The detective was a woman with a voice like winter. She thanked me for being precise. She thanked Harlan for the plums. She said Ralph had nice handwriting on his report, which made him blush. She said the word case in the steady way good people say responsibility. When we finished, I felt tired and clean. The last act didn't happen in a courthouse. It happened on a Saturday with a sign on my front lawn. Open house, it said, in cheerful letters. I hadn't ordered it. The agent hadn't either. Daniel had, with a new broker who didn't check a single thing that mattered. Cars lined the street and strangers wandered into my living room, speaking in voices that acted like my life was a set they could tour. I did not panic. I put on my church dress and my husband's watch. I took my folder of papers and my recorder and my keys. I called Ms. Alvarez. I texted Harlan apples. I called Ralph. Then I made lemonade because I was not about to greet my enemies with an empty table. When the first couple walked in, I smiled. Welcome, I said. You're just in time for a demonstration. They looked puzzled and took a paper cup. The broker arrived 5 minutes late. Lipstick too bright. We posted the lease pendants, I said pleasantly, and this house is not for sale. She started a sentence with the word misunderstanding and ended it in silence when the deputy pulled into the driveway. Daniel arrived last, stepping through the door with a confidence that faltered. When he saw me, I could see the moment he realized the shape of the room had changed. Ms. Alvarez stepped from the hallway, set a small stack of papers on the entry table, and said loudly enough for the room to hear, "Cease and desist. You are trespassing. So is anyone here at your invitation." The open house became a quiet house. People set their cups down as if afraid the lemonade might count as evidence. Daniel tried to laugh. "You can't prove," he began. I pressed play on the recorder. His own voice filled my living room, smooth and self-satisfied. We can make the date last week. It'll look cleaner. He lunged toward me. Ralph moved without moving. One step, a hand up, a look. Daniel stopped as if he'd hit glass. The broker apologized to the deputy so fast, she tangled her words. She took the sign from my lawn herself. When she left, she whispered, "I'm sorry," and for once I believed someone when they said those words. The charges came quietly. Fraud for the forged signature. Unauthorized practice for the advising. Attempted theft by deception for the house. The paper that had felt like a lasso became a leash on the right throat. My son was named as a witness, not a defendant. He sat on my porch the evening the detective called to tell us the news, and did not speak for a long time. When he did, he said, "I don't know how I became a man who forgot he had a mother." "It happened slowly," I said, "but you remember fast." He put his head in his hands and cried. He cried like a boy cries, all at once and honest. I put my hand on his back and let him. Somewhere inside that sound I forgave him for the first time, not all at once and not forever, but enough for the air between us to be air again. I changed my will. I put the cabin in a trust that becomes his. If he stays 1 full year without a missed counseling session, and 1 full year without borrowing $1 he cannot repay in writing. It is not punishment, it is scaffolding. For my granddaughter I made a small account with her name on it, and a note she will open when she is 18, that tells the truth and tells it gently. For my daughter-in-law I left nothing but a wish for a kinder mouth. That is sometimes how we love the people who did not love us well. When the last of the papers were signed and filed, Ms. Alvarez hugged me in the way women our age hug, when they have pulled each other across a river. "You did the hardest part," she said. "You stayed." Harlan fixed the back gate where it had sagged. Ralph returned the ladder I'd never borrowed and left a card with his number under a magnet shaped like an apple. The maple threw shade across the grass in a familiar shape that looks like a hand when the light is right. The ending is not an ending. It's a list of small, ordinary choices. I joined the community garden and took the plot by the fence. I learned my neighbor's dog's name and the name of the woman who delivers my mail on Tuesdays. I met a group of women at the library who knit and tell the truth. One of them, Birdie, 79 and fierce, said, "They think age makes us quiet," and we laughed in a way that made the librarian look up and smile. My son started attending the Tuesday group at the church basement. He texted me his counselor's business card. He paid the first bill without asking me to look at it. He started taking his daughter to the park on Saturdays and sent me a photo of her on the swing, hair flying, mouth open on a sound you could hear even in a still image. When the case against Daniel went to court, I wore the same dress I wore to the open house and the watch I wore to my wedding. I sat straight and told the truth. I did not add sugar. The judge listened. He was deliberate, a man in his 60s with a habit of polishing his glasses with a square of cloth when he needed a moment to think. He asked me what I wanted, not what I wished, not what I would settle for, what I wanted. I want my home to remain my home until I decide otherwise. I said. I want my son to learn the difference between responsibility and control. I want Mr. Daniel to stop using other people's fear as income. Reasonable, he said, and made it so. After, outside the courthouse, Daniel's eyes slid past mine as if I were a reflection on a window. My son stopped beside me and didn't look at him either. Sometimes victory is not a shout. It is the absence of a wrong voice in your house. That night I sat on my porch with a slice of lemon cake, and the evening. The maple whispered. The house held steady around me like a good hand. My phone buzzed. A message from my granddaughter. Nana, can I come sleep over Friday? I typed yes, and then, because I am a woman who has learned the use of paper, I wrote it down on a calendar I keep by the phone as if it were a legal document. Before bed, I walked through each room and touched what I had saved. The kettle, the quilt, the photo of my husband's hands at work, the Bible with my mother's name written in careful loops. The back door lock clicked shut, a small sound that means keep and home and enough. I am not done. Men like Daniel do not stop because one woman said no, but I have a voice again that does not ask permission to say my own name. I have a son who is learning to be a man beside his mother, not over her. I have a lawyer with a braid like a rope and a neighbor who knows when to bring plums. I have a garden plot that will do what gardens do if you show up and water. People ask how it happened. They want a moment, a single bad day to point at. I tell them the beginning and they nod, recognizing that kind of day. But the truth is this. My revenge did not arrive in a dramatic gesture. It arrived in steps I took with my own feet. It arrived in paper and patience, in the refusal to hand myself over, in the decision to stand inside my own doorway and not move until I was ready. It arrived in the way I said no without shouting and yes without fear. On my 75th birthday, my son slid a power of attorney across the cake and said, "Sign your house over, it's safer this way." I did not sign. I kept the pen. I used it to write my name exactly where it belonged. And if you want to know how I learned to keep that pen steady, I can tell you. But to understand how it all happened, I have to go back to the beginning.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.